Don't walk away from anything that hurt you without first doing some self-examination, because there are times where we may not even understand all that had happened, and we interpret it as one thing when it wasn't really that.
Welcome to Emunah, the podcast that explores ways to live God-honoring lives. For many believers, the church has been a place of worship, fellowship, and spiritual growth. But for others, it has also been a place of deep disappointment and profound pain. Perhaps you trusted a pastor who abused his authority. Perhaps private struggles became the subject of gossip. Perhaps you were excluded, judged, overlooked, or abandoned during one of the most difficult seasons of your life. When the hurt comes from the very people who represent Christ, the wound can cut deeply. It can leave us questioning not only the church, but our faith, and sometimes even God Himself. Hello, I'm your host, Dr. Tamara Henry, and our guest is no stranger to Emunah. Minister Eugene Howie serves in many capacities at the First Baptist Church of Glenarden International in Upper Marlboro, Maryland, which is a Washington, D.C. suburb. Together I think we're ready to tackle this difficult, sensitive, yet important topic. Church hurt. Welcome, Minister Howie.
Well, thank you so much, Sister Henry, and thank you for the opportunity to be able to come along and to be able to share on such an important journey. And so, and hopefully that by this and through it, that people may get clarity and help and even some wholeness and get some understanding, because I think it is a very deep topic. And so, thank you so much, and I look forward to what's ahead.
In this two-part series, we will first explore what church hurt is, what it is not, why it happens, and why it affects us so profoundly. In part two, we will explore a biblical path toward healing and restoration. If you have ever felt wounded in the house of God, this conversation is for you. People use the phrase church hurt for almost everything these days. Someone leaves a congregation, church hurt. Someone gets rebuked, church hurt. A disagreement over music or leadership, same label. And the more loosely we use the term, the harder it becomes to name the real thing, the wounds that happen inside the very community meant to be safe. Minister Howie, what does church hurt mean to you? How do you define it?
So I think you've covered it really well, because it for me, it does. It has a meaning that is subjective. It is local to that person's experience, because there's a reason in each and every church. There's a reason that people are there, and when something happens, something that disappoints you, it is just as simple as the sound. If it hurts you and it happened in that place, that is the simplest and broadest definition, but that's what it is, because what's the thing we call our churches? We call it, that's my church home.
Mm.
That's the only other place we use that term. We don't use my work home, right? We don't use my car home. We don't use that in any other place. We only use it, that's my church home. Now, there is a saying that says, home is where the heart is. So then if the home is where the heart is, at the very same place, that means It is exposed and it is vulnerable. And if it's exposed and vulnerable, then it is available and accessible to be hurt. So
Mm,
church hurt can be any number of things because of what the church means to so many people.
mm,
And so if it's your home and you grew up there and your family's there, you when you really think about it, that is a home, right? You
mm,
take your family to your home. When you're going to do
mhm,
something special, you invite them to your home. And when our children and family come in town, where do we take them? On Sunday morning, we want to get up and we're going to take everybody to our church
church.
home.
Mm,
Christmas, Mother's Day, Easter. That's
mm,
a day when people come to our home, but it's also the time when we take them to our other home. So there's an
mm,
attachment there. And
mhm,
that's why, it can have a broad meaning.
mhm, mhm. One of the things Minister Howie had suggested that I do to prepare for this episode is to conduct an informal survey of family, friends, church members dealing with church hurt. A lot of people were reluctant to talk about it, and others would give reasons for leaving the church but would not elaborate. For example, one person said, I left my prior church due to the new pastor's blatant indiscretions that could no longer be hidden from the congregation. A few talked about being pushed aside from a position or office. Can you imagine being sidelined, silenced, or shamed when you're already vulnerable? Another talked about a congregation closing ranks when someone raised honest concerns. And someone else described it as church culture, something I hadn't thought about. Churches having a culture, but I guess any organization would have a culture. We know how church culture can encourage conformity at the expense of individuality. Finally, can you imagine being encouraged to give your testimony and then feeling criticized, judged for your personal struggles, doubts, or failures when you shared in good faith? Minister Howie, the definition you've given matters because if we don't name things clearly, we either dismiss real wounds as overreactions or excuse sin as human imperfection. Language gives people permission to deal with pain instead of stuffing it down. Now, before we go further, it's just as important to say what church hurt isn't. You agree, Minister Howie? What isn't church hurt?
So so when I think of that question of what it is not, um, because the definition of it can be so broad and it can be so subjective, a person can almost accept anything to be something as, I'm this hurt me. And so I can't really give a firm definition of what it isn't because
Mm-hmm.
it's so personal. What
Mm,
what what may not hurt you, something you may never pay attention to. And you ever notice that sometimes there are people that are so sensitive to things that you didn't even see. Did you see the way that person looked at me when I walked by? And you'd be like, no, I don't think so. I didn't pay. Oh yeah, that's because it is such a very touchy subject. I
mm,
think the broadness of it, that I can't say that what it's not, because
mhm,
that's localized to the person. And then some of the things that we experience, they are not just about what we just experience in that moment,
mhm,
but it is the total sum of the things that we have experienced that we bring into the room with us everywhere we go. And so I almost want to say, and I know this is a bit tough, but people can almost take anything
mm,
that happens in or around or close to at church or with church folk as something as church hurt, even if
mm.
they don't attend church. Ain't that something?
They learned that from Jody was complaining, and I understand, right? They're getting it from someone else. It may not even be their personal church hurt.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
It's interesting you said that because a friend of mine, in talking to the survey about the survey, a friend of mine said that when she joined this church, her father had made some comments that affected her,
Yeah.
which I thought was interesting. And the Bible doesn't use the term church hurt. And I was looking up, there are other terms like stumbling block or offense or something like that.
Yeah.
So I found like Matthew 18:6, 7, and it says, 6:7 says, "But whoever causes one of these little ones who believe in me to sin, it would be better for him if a millstone were hung around his neck and he were drowned in the depth of the sea." And then woe to the world because of offense, for offenses must come, but woe to that man by whom the offense comes. That's just one. That's in Matthew. And then, the Bible talks about injustices and wrongdoing, malice or wickedness, trespasses, offenses. Um,
So but in a way, the in some of those in some of the words you will hear the stronger language, malice,
uh,
offense. But it can really be much more subtle than that. It can almost what people consider to be church hurt, it can be something so very subtle as because someone can do something without malice. And
mm,
it doesn't mean that a person won't accept it as malice. Because there's two perspectives. There is the person who is the offender
mhm,
and the offended.
mhm,
And the offended often doesn't get, the Bible also tells us, in all of our getting, get understanding. And a lot of people walk away from situations and circumstances, and the one thing they walk away without is
it's
understanding.
understanding.
They will be offended, they will be hurt, they will be angry, they will be I'm never going back to that place again. But the one thing they won't get is understanding. Because
Mm,
some of the things that happen in places are mainly misunderstandings. Now, I know some of the things that when people lay out church hurt really hurts deeper the deeper you go in.
mm,
So if you just occasionally attend, the hurt is not as deep as if you are in leadership, or you're a part of the deacon board or the trustees or a missionary. The deeper you go, the hurts at the level of the depth that you're in.
wow. Mm,
And so a lot
okay.
of people will walk away from churches after having been in the inner circles and will say, you know what? I'm done with church because of what they saw once they got on the inner circle, or what they experienced, or the way they interpreted the experience. Because some of it is not always what you experience, but it's sometimes the interpretation of the experience. So
So, what distinguishes church hurt then from ordinary conflict or disappointment?
it is really about the people and the place.
Okay.
Because if it's a person at work and they offend you, you understand that, because that's a place where you expect it to happen. It's okay. It's common, right? Because when you find people at work, everybody come from all different walks and backgrounds and places, and so they have different belief systems and different understandings. So, and if you find someone out in the marketplace, that person comes from any place in the world. They have different backgrounds, understandings, religions, and all of these other things. So when it happens, when someone offends you there is a more of an understanding, because you look at there's no basis of understanding. However, in a church, that's a bit different, you have an expectation at church that you don't have anywhere else.
Yeah.
So the beginning of disappointment is establishing an expectation. And so in that, the church, the preaching, the teaching, and all of those things establish an expectation.
Mm.
Love God, love people.
Mhm.
That's so if I just hear those words, love God, love people. I'm people, I qualify for love. And now there's the expectation that when I come into this place, that's what they do there. Love God, love people.
Mhm.
I qualify.
Mm.
And the hurt is when something that doesn't feel like love.
Mm.
And when it don't feel like love in a place that has the expectation, there's disappointment. And disappointment, there's hurt.
Mm. Wow. Wow. And what's the difference then between church hurt and spiritual abuse?
Oh, now listen. So because uh, because when you use the word abuse, there is an intent behind abuse.
Mhm.
Because abuse is not just accidental or unintentional. It is to the degree that where a person is knowingly doing things that they know is not helpful,
Mm.
beneficial, or causing the person to grow. And so
Mm.
the difference between the two is abuse is the abuser knows, right? So the abuser knows that the path or the action, the activity, they know that it's wrong before they start down the course. So if you look
Mhm.
at it, child abuser, they know that it is wrong to abuse children, right?
Mhm.
Domestic abuse, they know it's wrong. So spiritual abuse is no different. It is the person knows that it's wrong
Mm.
and proceeds down the course anyway.
Mm. Mm. Wow. Wow. And then what about hypocrisy
Oh, well,
versus
that's so.
church hurt?
So hypocrisy is a great word, right? So in its very Greek meaning, the Greek word hypocrisy is the same word through which we get the word actor,
Mm.
and it is the best depiction of it is to put on a face.
Mhm.
And so in putting on faces is one of those things that hurts people because, you know, at church, people put on faces.
Mm.
That at church, it could be glory, glory, hallelujah. But in the street, they may never even speak to you.
Mm. Yeah.
You see? And so that is, oh, wait a minute. That's the same person. So if I see you in the street, but I see you at church, you're two very different people. That means the moment you start to go into the church, you have to fix your face. You have to fix your clothes. You have to make sure that people know that you are at church. And so I know I'm going to get in trouble when I say this. It is always funny to me when there's abnormal terms in social spaces.
Mm.
So a lot of times there are people who talk like if you're in church, they use language they would never use anywhere else. So good morning. Good morning. Great. It's a great and glorious morning and God is good and great. And you know, and don't get me wrong. There's nothing wrong with being excited about what God is doing in your life. But there are some people, and we all have met them, where they are so over the top in their spiritual performance. And then if you saw them somewhere else, it's not the same person.
Mm.
So that's a smaller level, but when we look at hypocrisy most of the time, we think about people who say one thing and do another. And
Mhm.
so that happens in churches because when you start the beginning monologue, you talked about where sometimes people with pastors and things or whatever, where they find that people are not who they say they are, or who they profess, or who they try, and that becomes a thing too. And so the power of preaching is not in the words that you say when you're in the pulpit, but it is how the power of those words are leveraged and transformed in your own life when you're not.
Wow, that's deep.
And when your preached word don't make it into your lived lifestyle, people call that hypocrisy.
Wow.
So that means you have your stage face, and then there's your normal face. So
Wow. Wow. Now let's look at the three major areas from where church hurt arise. We have wounds caused by leaders, wounds caused by members, and wounds caused by church culture.
so I expect you're going to get in a bit of trouble for this podcast. Let me just because I'm going to say some things that are difficult to hear. But one of the places where there is a major gap in knowing about leadership and actually leading is church. Right. So so when you're talking about leadership, when a person is in leadership, you know what goes along with leadership? Leadership comes with the expectation that a person will lead and be responsible.
Mhm.
So, but what happens oftentimes is that so many people are so high on their authority, but overlook their responsibility.
Mm.
And when there is a discombobulation of your authority and your responsibility, people get hurt
Right.
because people want to make sure you know who they are and that you follow what they say
Mm.
rather than what they're responsible for. So let me just say a thing that I tell people all the time. For everyone that's in leadership, and if you're listening to this podcast, listen clearly. As a leader, you are responsible for way more than what you're in charge of.
Mm.
Because how
Love it.
people feel sometimes,
Uh-huh.
you are responsible sometimes in how you make people feel, even though you have no authority over how they feel. Mhm.
Wow.
So in those instances, leaders have a responsibility to lead with character and with care. I think the Bible characterizes, says, for as much as it lieth in you to live at peace with all men. And that
Mhm.
means to make it a pursuit, even in your leadership, to live at peace, not your dominance. So
Mm.
so
Mm.
if we look at that, if we kind of look at as we look at this faith, and we look at the church, and we look at how Jesus led, the
Mhm.
one thing Jesus never led with was his authority. I'll pause
Mm.
right there.
Mm. Mm.
If you look in
Wow.
Matthew 28, he didn't lead with it. He lended it. He says, all power has been given to me in heaven and in earth. Now go. Not do as I say,
Mhm.
but
Mhm.
go.
Go.
And he says at the end of that, I will be with you. The purpose of me saying that I have all power and going is that I'll be with you.
Mhm.
So that when you find those challenging times. So when you're talking about leadership, that's where a lot of people can get hurt because of being oftentimes that responsibility of leadership. And a lot of people walk into leadership roles without
Mhm.
ever having been trained. Do you know that people can lead in church where they'll never lead anywhere else?
That's true. That's true.
Where you can be the deacon of the church, the chair of the deacon board, but have never led anything else anywhere else.
Right.
So with that, a person may come into something so fast that they don't even understand what they're responsible for.
Mm.
They just know what they have authority over.
Mm. Mm.
So
Is
that's
that what?
that's your leaders. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, is that one of the reasons why church hurt is so common? You got so many imperfect people in the
So
building.
it is imperfect people. Now, but I will say this: as we deal with church hurt, we also have to look at it from two sides. We have to look at the side of the person that has been hurt
Mhm.
and the people or persons that are the cause.
Mm.
And so, what I'm about to say here next, it's going to be tough because if you find yourself that you've been hurt, you have to do a bit of self-examination. Can I just say this piece? Don't walk away from anything that hurt you without first doing some self-examination, because there are times where sometimes not blaming the victim, but there are sometimes we may not even understand all that had happened, and we interpret it as one thing when it wasn't really that, or we
Mhm.
in, we internalize a person's intent,
Mhm.
where you said this, and I have taken what I heard you say as to what I think you meant. And now I've internalized this and I'm hurt because you meant to say this. And it's like, no, what I do, have you ever had that experience where the thing you say and the thing you mean aren't the same thing?
Yes. Right.
But sometimes people will never listen long enough, never evaluate long enough to get past what you said to get to
Mhm.
what you meant,
Right.
to ask the follow-up question. So what I'm saying here is that when it comes to sometimes with church hurt, to really step back and evaluate a situation, to see, okay, well, this happened, but what happened, was that really the intent? Or was it
Mhm.
unintentional? Did this person intend to hurt me? Because a lot of times, if a person did hurt you, it could have been that they did not intend to. I mean, can I tell a story?
Sure.
And it could have very well been a place of church hurt for me, but I wasn't tuned in that way. So I was preaching, and I was preaching one Sunday morning, and some guys who were prominent preachers or well known or established, and they came to hear me preach. And so afterwards they were all assembled in the pastor's office, and so I went out to get something, and I came back. And when I came back in, they said, well, we listened to you preach, and you're not that good, and so I don't know what you think you're doing, but you're not that good. And so now, in that instance, if I freeze that frame, I had enough right there in that frame given to the people who were sitting there saying that. Well established men who had been preaching a long time
Mm.
said that inside the pastor's office in the church after service. I had every reason in that moment to walk away and go, man, why would they? But you know what I remembered?
What?
I never invited them to come hear me preach in the first place. And I and I I never said that I was good. So so it really didn't resonate with me, but I could understand how that, that like if they did that to someone else, right? And if you
Yeah,
took
it
what
could destroy
if
'em.
you took what you really did seriously enough, you took yourself serious enough, and just say, well, I just like, oh, okay. I mean, I didn't invite you. I mean, you chose to come here. I mean, you know, and so, but that could have because these that really could have hurt, and I could have walked away from ministry. I could have walked away from my calling. I could have done all of those things because, and so now let me look at the flip side of it. If I look at their side, can I ask the question and be critical and say, was their intent that morning to hurt?
Mm.
I don't really know. Maybe their intent could have been, well, if we tell him this, maybe this will help him get better. But it could have very well been. But I don't know what was their intent, right? And so, but if I judge it and say they were there to hurt me, and they did this to me, and I could tell that story, and I can grab a violin, and every time somebody says, "How aren't you in church?" Well, because when I was going, and I was going preaching, and I was preaching, and the preachers got around, and they all said I wasn't no good. That's why I don't do it. And I could have walked away from it.
Mm.
But that would take me evaluating and making a determination of their intent. And they were all leaders. They were all leaders.
Mm.
So leadership has to have some care to it. Okay.
And that kind of helps lead me to this next question. What would you say are the root causes beneath church hurt?
You said the root causes beneath it?
Uh-huh. Pride, jealousy, fear, insecurity, lack of accountability, immaturity. I mean, because those ministers, if they're not going to encourage a young person trying to, it sounds to me like there's some jealousy there.
So, and so now looking back, you can see it.
Yeah.
But in the moment, you can't.
That's right.
Right. And so you have listen, so what you just did there, you had an objective view of, so I just brought you into a room for you to watch what happened, and you took an objective, you go, oh, so now let me ask you something. Would you be now hurt by people that you come to understand that were jealous? You wouldn't be as hurt. If a person was jealous, you're like, they're just jealous. That's just how they are. Right. But now that you have that perspective, see, that's why I say when you start to evaluate it. So all of those things are underneath. All of those things, because believe it or not, again, you're going to get in a lot of trouble for this podcast, because what I'm about to say is a bit inflammatory. Preaching is very competitive. It is a competitive sport. The words are wrapped in humility, but oh, is it a competitive? And when you understand that, then you can say, okay, well, I can understand why people can be a certain way. We've all heard it, but we heard it as a joke. I'm telling you, you might have to take this down. You've heard it as a joke, but sometimes when you hear preachers say, I can't let that person come back here. An older preacher told me that when you go somewhere, you don't want to preach too good because they won't have you back. No, and I think about that, right? And so that's why I say it's a competitive sport, because if someone tells you they don't do so good because they won't have you back, but at the end of the day, you do what you're called. So yes, all of those things are underneath. And so what happens is, sometimes when other people are involved in church, or when people come in and they're doing things and they just want to be helpful, it can cause a person's insecurities to flare up. And people's insecurities now turn into a defense mechanism, you see. And so now, I want to come and help you with the ministry. No, this is, I've got everything the way I want it. And because a person is being defensive and they're insecure, you hurt a person, even though their intent was not to hurt, but it was to protect, because they're territorial. You see. And so they may never even know, well, why did that person leave the church? Well, they
Mhm.
left the church because they didn't have an opportunity to serve. Well, why they didn't have an opportunity to serve? Because you were so protective, and they thought it was you that they were rejecting, never knowing that you had done that to 100 other people because it
Mm.
was the issue, because it's mine, 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 mine.
Mm.
But Jesus is Lord. Okay. All right. So, so, so it is all of those things, because we all bring things into the church. And so, but if I really look at it, there is it is all, in a sense, immaturity, right? Because
Mm.
we are all
Mhm.
maturing. And
Mhm.
so maturity essentially is the really is us growing out of some things. We all did things when we were immature,
Mhm.
but we grew out of them. And so, in sometimes in church, if I can give somebody a little bit of perspective, sometimes what people have done in church to hurt you, wasn't about you, but it was about them and having grown out of the things that they were still into.
Mhm. 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 Now, I've taken the different statements from the informal survey and I boiled them down to core categories, and they are spiritual abuse and betrayal, hypocrisy and lack of integrity, gossip and slander, rejection and exclusion, neglect, judgment and shame, division and conflict. Do you like that order? How would you rank these?
Whoa. I would say, I don't know. Um, Lack of integrity is a big one.
Okay.
Lack of integrity um, is a big one, because because one of the things that, when you're thinking about inside the church and the people in the church, and um, for people not to be, people can better accept you being you versus you're being something you're not, only for them to
That's true.
find out that,
Mhm.
it's okay. It's one thing for people to see you as being humble, but then find you to be mean spirited, right?
Mm.
You see, and
Mhm.
so and
Mhm.
so people could deal with you if they knew you were mean spirited one way, because we all do. We all have family members, and if we don't know who that is, it might be us. We got mean spirited family members. They just mean for the sake of being mean, and you love them because you would just say that's just how they are.
Right.
But now,
Mhm.
if you saw that same person now get to church, and now they're this, it's like, oh, she is so loving. Like, who who you talking about? That person? So I think a lack of integrity, especially because, one of the things with churches is finance.
Mhm.
And when there is a lack of integrity around money, that's always a big thing.
Right.
And so lack of integrity. And so that would be a big one. So let me do the big three. So I would put lack of integrity in the big three.
Uh-huh.
Um, Gossip and slander. I don't know if that
Mhm.
would make the big three, but that would be certainly one, because but part of that, gossip and slander implies two things. There is a teller, there is a listener. Matter of fact, it implies three things. There is a teller, there is a listener, and there's a runner. That
Mm.
means there is somebody who is telling the slander. There is somebody who is listening to it, excuse me, and then there's somebody who is running to tell other people.
Mhm.
And so in all of that mix, I think there was someone in our Sunday school class said, "Hey, if you're not telling me the way in which you're trying to help the person or the situation, I don't want to hear it."
Mhm. Mhm.
So that's that. I would put that in probably the big three. What were the others you had?
Uh, s- Spiritual abuse and betrayal, rejection and exclusion, neglect, judgment and shame, division and conflict.
Now, division and conflict,
Mhm.
because that is So that because that's the counterculture of the church, right? So when you look at the book of Acts, one of the things about the book of Acts talks about one of the things that of the early church was that they had everything in common, which means they had unity. And so if there is anything that the adversary would want to cause in the midst of the church, would be the very opposite of what happened in the very beginning. And that would be division, to separate, to break up, to cause dysfunction and malfunction. And so that would be a big one. And that happens because you have factions, because you have people in, which is interesting when you think about churches. We have these denominations. So it's kind of in the name that the church is broken into different denominations, whether you are UME, AME, full gospel. They're broken. The church itself is already broken into denominations, which in the mathematical sense is division. But anyway, so but no, so inside the church that cause church hurt, the division that causes it is sometimes when people do have different ideas and different ways of doing things, or just saying, well, we've the biggest thing is when you have division of two different ages, where you'll have one group that says, hey, we always did it this way. And then there's the group that says, well, we're doing it this way now. And then so in the midst of the same church, rather than having a come together, it's like, well, y'all fine. Y'all do it y'all way and we do it our way. And so you have that kind of division, and it changes the dynamic of a church, where it really takes a very skilled leaders to ensure that there is unity among them. But in that, sometimes when people start to choose sides, when they start to divide, people get hurt in the cutting, in the separating into this group or into that group. And because what's the one thing that people talk about that happen in churches sometimes? It's called a church split.
Oh, yeah.
Where a church will split apart because something has happened in the midst of the church, and people will say, well, I'm with this person and I support them, and I'm with this person and I support them. And we don't mess with those people, but they'll be in the same church. And oftentimes what happens in that, there's a winning faction and a losing faction, and the losing faction often are the people who are hurt. So let me say it differently, because actually both sides carry wounds. It's just that the other people that are present, it's not as prevalent, it's not as shown as the people who may be what consider themselves the winning faction. So there's a church, and they had a falling out, and some people support the pastor. This is a fictitious church as it is. So that some people support the pastor, and other people, they don't support the pastor. And so the people who are going to stick with the pastor, they stay with him. And the people who don't stick with the pastor, they leave. But what happens is it wasn't. And so let's say it was a polarizing figure like the pastor, and the people separate. The people still had relationships among one another. But they disagreed on support of the pastor. They support of this particular thing. And so that they're both hurt. It's just one more than the other. Now that portion, I can say I've seen that with my own eyes, but I didn't understand what I was looking at. I was looking at a church to come apart, and then there's two groups. But when I see those groups get together, you know why it was so hurtful? Because their kids grew up together. You see? And they were all in the church, and it was like a family church. And when there was a split, people's kids grew up together, and they got to know them. And this person taught this person, and they went to this person, but now they don't see each other anymore, and they don't talk anymore. And when there's something did happen that bring them together, you could almost see the visual hurt on both parties. That I've seen with my own eyes. And I'm like, wow, they're all hurt. And with that, no one has the fortitude to step forward and say, listen, I think we should all get together, talk, and be able to say, I'm sorry. One of the most divisive things that happen in the church, you know what that is? Do you know what it is?
What?
Especially in smaller churches, the church meeting. The church
That's
meeting.
true.
A fight will break out at a church meeting. So those are the kinds, and that's indicative of division and
Mm-hmm.
factions clash. Then there's damage and there is hurt.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people walk away from things never getting healed, and they stay hurt.
Mm-hmm.
So those will probably, I know, so those at the top, lack of integrity would be a big one.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then
Gossip and slander, you said, and
gossip,
division and
slander, and
conflict.
then the people breaking into factions, which is the division and schism.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's good. That's good. Any biblical examples of church hurt?
Well, I know there is the possibility, right? That there's a
Mm-hmm.
place where it could have happened. There was a time when Paul approached Peter.
Oh,
And
right.
so because Peter was kind of, you know, had a bit of hypocrisy. He
That's
was
right.
acting one way with this
Mm-hmm.
group and another way with another group.
Mm-hmm.
And so then there is then that confrontation could cause a bit of schism. It
Mm-hmm.
could cause a bit of division. Then there's Priscilla and Aquila. No, it's I can't remember offhand, but it was like, I am of Apollos and I am of Paul. And
All
so
right.
and that represents, and so now there's like, wait a minute, wait. How are you now choosing factions? You see,
Mm-hmm.
and so that is a symbolism of a divided church. And that happens more than not when you have, sometimes you may have there are some people that other people may really like, and other people like, well, I don't really care for that person, so I don't really come on that day, but I come on this day to support this person and this, that, the other. And so then so those things, even in biblical times, and so what we're saying, there has to be, at some point, there has to be a reckoning where someone is willing to say, wait a minute, even in factions, neither side is right.
Mm,
Because the
mm,
fact that you have chosen to break into factions is the very wrongness, rather than
yeah.
seeing where is the unity within the gospel, rather than choosing the division that is in the world.
Wow. Love it. That's wonderful. That's wonderful. How can church hurt affect a person's relationship with God?
So a lot of times it can cause people to walk away from the faith. There are many people that walk away from the faith because of the faith is in so many instances representative by people.
Mm-hmm.
And so you go and you see the people, and your people were so nice, or the people weren't so nice, and they were this and they were that. And it was like, when this happened, man, I just left. I don't even want to hear about, because it can affect people's relationship with God, because sometimes people think that the church, the organization, is the same as Christ, the organism.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so if we just pull down for a moment to see that the church, the 501c3, the organization, is sometimes very different in principles and practices than Christ, the
Mm,
organism.
mm.
I think I heard T.D. Jakes said, he said, if Christ was to actually walk back into a church, he wouldn't even understand half the stuff we're doing. So when we think about organized religion
Mm-hmm.
and a person practicing their faith, people can kind of make that the organized religion representative, that that God allowed me to experience this hurt, this pain, this mistreatment, these people doing this way, talking one way and being another, doing this and doing
Mm-hmm.
that. And God allowed me, I don't even want anything to do with that. And that's the organization. That's not God. You see,
Amen.
because it, but people can make that confusion sometimes because that becomes so much of their identity. Because when we go back, that's my church home.
Mm-hmm.
It is not about what church you are in. It is about how much of the church that is actually in you.
In you. Wow.
And
Mm,
so, and so people can walk away from the relationship because those people represented the relationship and they're not. But I will say, if I can talk to somebody who has that similar experience, do want to say that God did choose you to go through that experience.
mm,
But that experience, every pain, every hurt is not always to hurt us,
mm-hmm.
but it is to make you sensitive to
Mm,
others.
mm,
But you will never be sensitive to others if you don't have the experience. Think about it. If you get a cut on your arm right now, before it's healed, it will spend a season of being sensitive.
mm,
I would hope that if you've ever of a person experienced that hurt, that they would spend a season of their life being sensitive to others that have been hurt and those who are the offenders. To really think about, like, hey, have I really did that to someone? But I know that's probably that's for the one to come. I know. But back to your program already in progress.
Well, this has been a tough topic to tackle, Minister Howie. And thankfully, we will not end on this somber note. There must be a bridge to healing. And that's where you were uh, angling toward, the bridge to healing that we will focus on in episode 2. So, in preparing for healing, why is understanding the nature of the wound so important before healing can begin?
It's two parts. Understanding the nature of the wound is not just about the experience, but it is about you. Because you ask yourself a couple of questions. What is it in you that was already sensitive that made you be so easily hurt?
Mm, mm,
Where did it first happen? Is there a place where you didn't feel that you were loved? Is there a
mm,
place where you felt you weren't enough? And what a person did simply hit a tone that resonated with something that was already inside you. And now, rather than being able to fully account for the experience to say what you may have to do,
mhm,
you simply put it off on them as hurting you. And if you
mm,
put it off on them as hurting you, then you don't have any accountability to do anything for yourself to heal. That's why it's important that you understand not just the nature of it, but the nature of you that is behind it.
wow.
What was the place in you that the hurt hit that
Mm,
really made you know the hurt was there?
mm,
And when you find that, you have now you're now getting to the place where you can say, wait a minute, that what that person said. So when I gave the example about the people in the church, if I really felt self-conscious about it,
mhm,
if I really took that serious, I would want to know, I would have to be able to look and say, well, why would did I feel as though I wasn't doing what I was called to do when I got up there? You see, but being fully persuaded. I like Paul's writing where he's like, I am fully persuaded. When you're fully persuaded about what you're called to do, you
mhm,
don't there's a certain buffer against that kind of hurt. But if there is something where you feel a bit unsure, being unsure is a little bit of an opening. And I think that may have been what people may have been looking for. There may be an opening. Let's see. But if you start looking at why was I hurt by it?
mhm,
Not just what happened. That's the easiest thing to do in all the world is to get hurt and to blame the people and say they hurt me. That's
mhm,
easy. The hard stuff is to say, okay, it hurt, but why? Why did it hurt me? Did I give them something I shouldn't have given them? Did I give that man or woman a trust that was only reserved for God? And when they betrayed my trust, because I gave them something that should have only belonged to God, it hurt me because they weren't supposed to have it in the first place.
Wow.
And it was really trying to show you, hey, wait. That doesn't belong there, because in some, I'm going to say it, in some places, the pastor seems like he's almost a deity. I'm not saying he's God, but he's human. He is no different than all of us. He's no different than dressed up dust. And so if we give anyone something that does not belong to them, and then they fall, then we're hurt because we held them up to something that, holding people up to standards that you yourself can't even stand on. My goodness,
That's true.
I don't know. So anyway, but I think that's the place to start, to understand why it hurt you. And if you can start there, that's the beginning of the journey, to understand that there is a grave difference between the church, the organization, the 501c3, and God, Jesus Christ, the organism, the living God. There is a difference between the two. And it's not always that the church, because every place that got a cross out front ain't a church.
That's true.
And so some places with a cross out front, it's a hospital.
It's true.
And they both have that in common. So when you see a church with the cross out front and you see a hospital with a cross out front, they're both for hurting people. And going into it, understanding that on the inside of this building, there may be people who are hurting, who are not fully healed. And they are capable of hurting others without even knowing it. And having that understanding may be helpful in understanding what is it in you that they actually resonate with, where the hurt actually hit. So I think that might be helpful.
Wow.
That's the place to start.
That is wonderful. Thank you, Minister Howie. Church hurt is real, but it is not the final word. In this episode, we have sought to understand what church hurt is and why it leaves such deep wounds. The failures of people do not define the character of God, as Minister Howie has reminded us. And the wounds inflicted in the church can become the very places where God begins his healing work. In our next episode, we will explore how God heals the wounded, how trust can be rebuilt, and what both individuals and churches can do to move toward restoration. And on that note, we say, live in victory.